Alright, what's up, ZBrushers? Welcome back to ZFever. My name is Ricky, and we're going to be continuing this sculpture. I did a live session yesterday, and didn't realize that I had my mic muted for the entire hour and a half that I was doing this entire thing, so we didn't have a whole lot of people hopping in, but that's okay. So I'll recap on some of the things that I went over and some of the things that I did with this, even a little bit after the live session, just to kind of catch you guys up to speed and give you a little bit of my thought process if you're interested in any of that. First, let me drop this audio down just a little bit. I like to have a little music in the background. It just kind of helps me to chill. But I don't like it too loud. Here we go. All right. I am looking over the live chat, so if anyone wants to have a, drop in a word or two, ask a question, what have you, feel free to ask. But I'm going to focus primarily on what I have to do here. All right. I think we got everything set up, ready to go. Okay. So yesterday, I had a few goals in mind whenever I hopped in here. It's always good to take inventory from the time, whenever you're done with your sculpting session. Sometimes you come into it and you have a ton of energy and you just want to run and go. But you need to have an objective most of the time. It's easy to get burned out. And really, it comes down to having a task at hand and pushing through and accomplishing that thing. A lot of times, if you don't do that, then you'll know that you need things to check off your list to do, but if you don't have those things kind of written down or listed out somehow, it's easy to get bogged down with things, so to speak. So what I did yesterday is I came through, and I'm going to show you guys again, now that I have my audio running, how I got this warp on it going. And I also talked about getting this bow fixed. I wasn't hugely satisfied with the posture or the pose of the wrists. Let me affect the light here a little bit. I wasn't happy with the way that the hands were looking. And so I spent a good deal of time yesterday after the live session working on it, because this is what it previously looked like. And it just, to me, it doesn't look right. Even now, it's not my favorite, but I'm going to leave it as it is. Okay. So I went from basically that to what I have here. This one's scaled up to the actual size that I'm going to have it printed out as. So I went through and I made some adjustments, made things look a little more appropriate. I say appropriate as if it was inappropriate. What I mean, though, is that that it makes sense physically. And the things that I'm going to focus on today are going to be getting all this wrapped in here, because I kind of did it's kind of a Frankenstein of sorts. This was a head from a previous sculpture that I did, and the body is composed of 2 base meshes. It's just how it wound up. If I had to do it all over again, I would just start from a generic base mesh, sculpt that out, and then pose it, and then continue sculpting until I was satisfied with what the results were. But that's just not the direction I went. It just goes that way sometimes. My goal at the end of the day is not sculptural perfection. I want to tell a story, even if it's simply just, hey, here's this Native American warrior, and this character doing something, shooting at the moon or whatever it happens to be, and I want to have it in a setting. I'm kind of fascinated with the Old West and the and cowboy art and Western art in general. It's just one of those things I always have enjoyed listening to stories about over the course of my life. So let's see. Just some elements just to kind of tell you how I got to where I am here. I've incorporated a handful of different workflows. All these pieces here are using array mesh. I built the war bonnet using an array mesh too. And then these were ZFever meshed. I need to go through and fix the creases on this front piece here. These here are curved tubes that I used a snake hook brush on to just kind of pull out the shapes a little bit. And I'm going to go through and focus on trying to resolve these things today, as well as this welding in all of this geometry from the arms. What my goal is to try to get as far as I can today, so that within the next 2 sessions we should be getting ready to part this thing out to go to the 3D printer. The other thing that we need to keep in focus is the type of production that we're going to end up using. So I'm going to be using a CR10, a Creality CR10 FDM printer. I've got about, let's see, it's a 10 by 10 by, it's about 15 inches in vertical height. So what's going to end up happening is this guy's going to get parted out into a couple, several different pieces. But whether I was printing on it, you need to be cognizant of the type of, or the restrictions of the material or the medium in which you're going to be making it. So I'm using an FDM printer, and I can get pretty decent detail out of it, but because of the nature of the printer, there's always going to be lines from the printing, and I have to think a little further down the road as far as, how much detail am I actually going to end up putting into this thing. And that will determine a lot of things for you. As sculptors or digital artists, we can get down to the fine details of stuff that nobody's ever even going to notice, and you only have so much time to dedicate to a thing. So it's good to be realistic with that and understand that different processes may end up obliterating half the work that you did digitally, and you need to be okay with that. But in order to be okay with that in the first place, you need to understand the process that you're using. Now, there are other printers, other processes that have much finer fidelity, but that's not here, not today. But so I say all that to say there are certain things like here within these feathers. I know that I want them to. I'm going to ultimately do a Dynamesh and get all this stuff to weld together. I'm going to be okay with losing some fidelity here. And the reason why is because whenever I'm done printing, I'm going to go over it with, I'm going to go over the entire print with a coat of UV resin, and then I'm going to let that kind of blend in the gaps, so to speak, and let that harden. And then I'm going to come back over it with a couple of coats of paint, some bronze paint that I can then turn around and do a patina on. So there are some things that can be hidden within that, and I'm okay with that. Now, if you want tons of fidelity, tons of detail in your sculpture, more power to you, but you need to know the medium that you're working with and all that jazz. So, without further ado, let me give you a little bit of a demo on how I got this war bonnet, and then whenever I'm done with that, we will talk about getting this going on here. Then once we're done sculpting away at that, then we'll attack the arms, and depending on how much time we have after all that, I may proceed on. I need to make him some little moccasins. So yeah, that's the aim here. Let's see how much time it takes us to get through this. All right, so here we go. So the first thing I want to do, and I apologize if anyone was watching yesterday. There wasn't any. I didn't have my mic unmuted, so I went through the whole thing, and yeah, it happens. All right, so basically what I wound up with is this at the end of the process. I want to show you how I got here, okay? So I started out with a single feather. This I purchased somewhere on ArtStation, I believe it was. I can't remember the artist's name off the top of my head, but I bought a bunch of his stuff. I bought some textures, some rocks, and some other things, and I have not been disappointed with the quality of their work by any stretch. So let's see. I'm gonna come in here, turn on my polyframe. I want to just get this head isolated. So we're gonna split hidden. I'm gonna turn these off just for demonstration. Okay. So whenever I'm working with something like this, I like it. Might seem a little bit sloppy, and I probably could put these things into a folder, but I'm not going to do that right now. So I'm going to duplicate this just so I have a non-destructive thing, so I can always go back. All right. So I'm going to take this feather, use our gizmo, scale this down just a little bit, and I need to do a few things. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take this feather, that head, and the rest of this, and I'm going to move it all forward here in a second. So I need to merge it all down, and I'll explain why. You can start with the head that's like just, or a head or a circle or anything that's just centered in the world, but I'm trying to show you how to solve a problem if you run into it. Okay, so we're going to merge down. I'm just going to get all these pieces into one subtool, and what I want to do is I want this to be resting in the center of the world, right? I want the center of the head to basically be in the center of the world. And the reason why I want that to be is because we're going to do an array mesh, and we need to be able to array around the center of the 3D world. Okay, so I'm going to project this just a little bit more forward. Okay, that's good enough for what we need to do. Now we need to go back and part this thing back out, or at least get our feather isolated. So I'm going to go auto groups, I'm gonna select rect, and all I'm gonna do is hide everything else. Subtool, split hidden. Okay. I'm just gonna get this into position. We can scale it down just a little bit too. Maybe lengthen it a bit. Okay, and we're gonna use this feather as our array mesh. Now, I'm gonna come over here to array mesh, and there's something that we've got to do before we actually start editing this thing. So once we turn array mesh on, we need to lock the position of this piece. Otherwise, it's going to affect the rest of everything else that we have going on here. So we're going to go lock position, and then I want to say reset. And what it's going to do is it's going to reset the center back to the 0, 0, 0 of the world, right? Okay, and now that we've done that, now we can go through and start making our edits. So I'm gonna see, let's see, how many do I want to duplicate? I'm just gonna go to a higher number than I think I might need, and then we'll go back down from there. So we're gonna array around the Y. Okay, so I want it to go that far. Let's do 90 degrees. Okay, and then we'll do an offset in the X. There we go. And we can also do an offset in the Y. All right. And then let's see, what else can we do? We can do rotate. So let's try rotating on the X. There we go. There we go. Rotating the Z, and then we'll do another offset in the Y. You just play around, regardless of what it is that you're making, you should be able to accomplish the effect. So like if you were making like a crown or something like this, like what I'm showing you here is basically a lengthier version of what Joseph Drust shows on the ZBrush website. So if you don't want to hear me stammering around about stuff, you can go watch that. So let's see. There we go. Just trying to get these things tucked in a bit. But you get the idea, right? And with this, you can change the angle, do a little bit of an offset back. Okay. Might be a little bit too much. You can spend as much time or as little time as you want to. The other alternative is to go through and do this the old way, which would be duplicating it one by one. In some cases, that might be preferable. Okay. And so basically, once you have your general shape that you're looking for, I'm not crazy about this at the moment. But the point is basically you have your general shape, right? And you go through and you make your array. And let's bump it up to C14. You got a lot of feathers, right? All right. So basically, once you have that, the rest is all just mirror and weld. So you say make your mesh, then if you need to be able to isolate, you do auto groups. Now it would have been easier, say, if I had just made it all one piece. I didn't do that. That's all right. Basically, all I'm gonna do is take this, hide all this geo. Split hidden. And then I'm going to do a Z plugin. We're going to go subtool master mirror. I'm going to merge it into one subtool across the X. And there we go. We have a makeshift warp on it, right? Now you can go through and tweak that to your heart's delight. But basically, that's all I did to be able to get what I have over here once ZBrush is done doing its autosave. And I applied it to the head and then put it all together and matched it up to the rest of the pose. And I did a similar thing with this piece of bone armor. Next time, if I do another one of these, I'll go through and I'll make a little more detail on this. But for what I'm doing with it, it's not going to matter. It's going to be so small that it's probably going to get filled in anyway, because I'm not using a resin printer. Okay, so my goal here right now is to focus on these pieces here. And the way that I got this was simply I used a curve snap brush, right? So curve tube snap, and basically all we did was just say we. There's more than one of me. There's not. All I did was just draw across the surface, right? And I followed basically the side of his leg. And once I was done with that, came over to curve functions, deleted the curve, and then just used a combination of the move brush right, to set things into position. And then the rest was the snake hook brush. And it's just pulling things out. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to get the overall form, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to Dynamesh the majority of it. I'm not going to throw a whole lot of detail, so what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to go from here. I mean, the total points is 756, so it's really light as far as this is concerned. And what I'm going to do here is basically going to be the same process I'm going to do up here. So, like I said previously, I like to have a non-destructive version, you know, before I begin on something. So I'm going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to save. And now we're going to go through and I'm going to Dynamesh this so I can get a little more geo to sculpt on. Geometry. Let's start with 300 and see how that works out. That's pretty dense. So let's bump that down. Even 128 is probably going to be pretty dense. But we'll work with it. Okay. So I like the reason that I did the snake hook is because I wanted to have that quick contrast in shape. Now what I want to do is I'm going to come through and I'm going to kind of smooth it out a little bit, because if I don't, these edges are just going to get obliterated. So I'm going to come back, smooth this out a bit. That way it retains the general form, but it gets rid of the stuff that's just not going to matter anyway. Tuck that in a bit. Let's have a look at this side. Same thing over here. Now when you're using the snake hook, especially with geometry that's not very dense, sometimes the geo can get pretty deformed. You might wind up with some holes in there. There are a few ways to fix that. We can certainly try Dynameshing it. Another thing we can try and do, if we need to, is using the inflate brush, and that will expand the geo so that it doesn't get completely, so it doesn't become so thin that it basically just disappears, you know. And I'm just going over it with a smooth brush right now, just to try and soften these edges and avoid having to use the inflate brush. I'll bring that up. And then I pull that out just a little bit. There we go. Okay. So now that I've got basically the general idea here, I'm going to come back over it with just the clay brush. But what I want to do is I'm going to come up to the stroke palette, set it over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the lazy mouse. I'm going to set the lazy step to 0.06, something very small, right? And then I'm going to set the lazy radius to, say, I don't know, let's start with 35. And what it does is it kind of gives us a little bit, I like the way that it causes the brush to behave a little bit better. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just affect the surface of this a little bit. The other thing I want to do before I get ahead of myself is over in the brush palette, I want to change our masking. Down in auto masking, I want to come down and I want to turn on back face masking. And what that's going to help with is it's going to prevent, like when we go over the surface, you have to imagine that there's an actual sphere, like this round, this circle here actually represents an invisible 3D sphere, and it's crossing through this geometry. And some brushes will actually pull the bottom side upwards, right? And you won't want that to happen most of the time. And so by doing back face masking, it'll help with that and keep you from thinking that everything's super cool, and then whenever you turn, all of a sudden it becomes a nightmare. Right. Now this is supposed to be like leather, little leather frilly bits, right? Almost like hair. So we're just gonna have them overlap. Not gonna go too wild with it. And in real life, it would be really thin, but I'm gonna leave it about this thickness just because I want it to read correctly. Again, we're making artwork. We're not making a bridge or anything like that. We're just sculpting from the imagination, hoping people like what we make and should be comfortable even if they don't. And by doing this, it's going to give me enough, should give me just enough surface uh, changes that whenever it goes through to print, it gives me some kind of contrast. Now I do sometimes use some other things to help me out, like adding like some epoxy sculpt or some epoxy putty um, to add some details after it's already been printed. I'm not planning on doing that on this one, but it is always an option. So let's knock this side out. I do need to go through the Facebook group that I made for this channel years ago. I just stopped updating most of it. I got busy with a lot of stuff, and I need to make a decision either to keep the group or I might just shut it down and rebrand the channel to something a little more generic that applies to a little more than just ZBrush, which I've been thinking about doing anyway. But in terms of the Facebook group, it's gotten overrun by people trying to sell all kinds of random stuff because I turned it on to be like a public group because I was just too busy to sit there and manage it. And I wanted to give people resources, some free resources, but if people are just going to hop on there all the time, and if I have to spend 20 minutes or more per day trying to sift through people trying to sell knickknacks and shoes and whatever else on the group, I'll just shut it down. There's plenty of other places like ArtStation and whatnot that people can share their work on and everything. All right. So now I've added those, I guess I'll go back with Damien Standard and kind of do the same thing. I'm gonna switch it over to freehand. I'll leave that alpha. Put this up to 50. Let's check the depth on this. It's a little too harsh. There we go. Another alternative for doing this would have been possibly to use the fiber mesh, but I don't know that would have. It's an alternative, but it's not the best alternative. I'll say that. ZBrush has a lot of super cool functionality, and you can get bogged down with just trying to figure out how to make something work correctly. And what I've learned is that, sometimes the simplest thing to do is to sculpt it out. Another thing I've had to learn over the past many years that I've been doing this is to not let perfect get in the way of something better, right? Sometimes you just have to get out there and you have to just throw stuff out. And the arts are competitive enough as it is. Shouldn't let that stop you from expressing yourself and putting things out there. In 3D, there's so many different things that you have to know, especially if you're trying to get work. You need to know so many programs and techniques and everything. And sometimes that ends up taking over what you originally ended up getting into all this in the first place for. Right? I mean, everybody's got to have a job. Everybody's got to be able to provide for their families, and everybody's got to eat, But don't get lost in the weeds, so to speak. At the same rate, I found myself going back to the fundamentals a lot more. I love sculpting. I actually never thought that I would ever be doing anything like this, especially for a living. And in my day-to-day work, I do a lot of sculpting, a lot of concepting, and sometimes I run into roadblocks because there's a fundamental that I've either been out of practice on, or I needed to relearn in a different way, So I highly encourage anyone to get on here on YouTube. There's plenty of super awesome demonstrations. But there's other resources like Skillshare. And this isn't an advertisement at all, but I do use Skillshare. But sometimes you just need to get out of your comfort zone, or you need to challenge yourself. Even if you've been doing this for a hot minute, there's always something that you can learn and somebody that you can learn from. In fact, recently I've been spending a lot of time drawing hands. One, because my drawing skills at drawing hands has sucked a lot. And it's one of those things, like, I wish that I'd spent a little more time doing it. Now I'm a little more comfortable with it. Not great at it, but it's one of those things that I know that if I keep practicing, then it'll just become second nature. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, never stop learning, whether it's this or some other thing. So when you go to art school, like I realized pretty early on that most of art school is just somebody babysitting you while you practice the techniques that they're teaching you. I don't mean to be, I don't mean to disparage art school, but I guess the art institutes. I'll say that I went to the art institute, um, and I had some really cool instructors. But then I also had instructors that just like I don't know how they were working in that position that they were in, uh, because there were a lot of times that you know I would go home and find more compelling or more useful things on YouTube than when I was learning in the classroom, right? And if I had to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't go through the art institutes. Now they're pretty much shut down nowadays, but it is what it is. Let's go through and do the same thing with this. Just did down there. Soften this up a little bit. I'm gonna add some material here. Just remember that this is going to get printed, so I need to make sure that I don't have like any massive undercuts or any like gaps or anything. Now a lot of that probably would get sorted out by whenever I go through and do my Dynamesh, but because it does get a little thin there, I'm going to go through and add just a little bit of material. That should hopefully be good. There. All right. So just like down here, I'm just going to go through and add a little bit of feathering here. I'll leave that alone. All right. Like I said, I don't want to get too carried away with this because it's not gonna end up showing up half the time in the print. And whenever you do have, like if you're making a print and you know that it's not gonna it's going to have trouble reading. Sometimes the answer might be to really dig in. That's one solution to that. So maybe that's what we'll do here. And I'm okay if some of this gets a little bit obliterated. I'm okay if it falls apart a little bit. Bump up the intensity a little bit. I need to do something with that. We'll deal with that in a minute, though. I'm making this for a co-worker, and I have no idea where it's going to be going. Hoping that it just winds up sitting on a shelf somewhere. And of course, I can always make other ones. But if I do decide to make another one, I'll probably make a mold. Maybe cast it in some hydrostone. Something like that. Nope. Okay. That's about as detailed as I'm going to get with this. And pull this back. All right, so I got that resolved. Next thing I want to do is work on these arms. See how we're doing on time. Okay. All right. Trying to think of the best way to go about this. I think I'll start with this arm. I know that on this one, I want to do a little bit of sculpting here, especially. Obviously, there's going to be some sculpting happening here to blend these two together. I want to be able to sculpt out here. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to separate this forearm from the rest of the arm. Like the forearm and the hand will all be together. The rest of the arm will be here. We'll work on blending this in. So let's get the easiest part done first, so we can spend the majority of our time fixing this. Before I jump through and do that, I'm gonna step away for just a second. Give me about 5 minutes. I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so we're gonna work on this one first. Like I said, I like to do things with a bit of a non-destructive purpose. So I'm gonna duplicate this arm, hide it, or hide the original, and look here. There's a bit, because there's a gap here, I'm gonna end up putting a sphere in here, just kind of close that gap. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to think ahead of how this is all going to go together. I know that whenever I go to print, I'm going to lob these things off and just print them flat, and then I'll attach it with some epoxy. So let me solo this. I want to keep this level of detail. So I'm going to go through, let's go ahead, geometry, Dynamesh. Let's see how it does just at 128. No, I would not like to freeze this. Nope, didn't work. Knew better than that. So let's try 350. I'm gonna turn off blur. Let's go. do a delete lower. I'm gonna Dynamesh this thing. There we go. All right. So now we got this all together. Those welded together pretty okay. It's not really necessary to come through and try to clean this up. But, so one of the things that just happened there, you guys probably didn't notice it, but it slowed down a little bit, and one of the reasons why was because I had dynamic subdivisions on. Sometimes it'll make things a little bit sluggish. Just be aware of that whenever you're going through, and let's say you went through and you Dynamesh something. If you happen to accidentally press that button, it can bog things down. It can be very irritating. So, just a tip. Now, since I'm here, there's a spot that I want to deal with. This might not even read that well in the final sculpt, like whenever it gets printed. But I would like to be able to represent it somewhat. Alright, not going for anatomical perfection here. Like I said, don't let perfect get in the way of better. So we're going to take this, and then we're going to take this, and we are going to merge all of it together. Before I do that, I want to try and get things to line up. I know that this is going to be a problem, so yeah, we're gonna blend this together, and then we'll come back and fix it. Let's see. There's my arm. I know it's going to be down here. Yeah, I was way off. All right. Okay. So we're going to merge these down. Before I do that, let me save. All right. Merge down. There we go. And then, so we're sitting at 545,000. And let's see. Let's try it. I don't think it's going to work at 376. We'll see. So I'm going to Control W, make it all one group. Try and Dynamesh. That worked out pretty good. Let's try to do 250. Yeah, that'll be fine. All right, so we're gonna come through, work out these seams. Come through, repair that a bit. While I'm at it, before I start sculpting on this, let me go ahead and get this other arm handled. So let me go up to the highest subdivision, subtool, and rename it RARM. Okay, duplicate. This is why I run into so many freaking subtools. Sometimes it winds up being better just to do take the key elements, drop them into a new project, and keep going. Not the best solution, but that's the way I roll sometimes. So grab this, that, invert the selection. Geometry, delete lower, and then I'm going to split hidden. There we go. And before I get too far with this, I need to try and manage some of this over here first. So I'm gonna chop away at that a little bit. remesh. Okay. All right. So I'm going to merge down. Okay. Now we're just going to do another remesh. Should close that hole up. There we go. Control W, make it all one group. Let's try and deal with this. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on stuff that's not even going to be seen. All I'm doing is just sometimes just gotta chop the thing off. Modify topology, delete hidden, remesh. Same thing over here. Okay. So now we'll work on this a little bit. I just want to repair this just a little bit. Whoops. Now, in most cases, it's better to do this at a lower subdivision level. You could totally do, we could go through and do a Z remesh, get something a little more friendly, so to speak. But we'll be all right. What we're trying to accomplish here is going to be just fine. Might walk away with some muscles that don't really exist, but I'm okay with that. Just adding some mass here. Try and represent the scapula. Add this there. Fill this in. And obviously, it's good to have some good reference around. Your back has these muscles that kind of wrap all the way around, and then you've got serratus muscles here. And these are the primary ones that are going to end up being seen. It's going to be a bit exaggerated. I do want to deal with this here. This weird bulge. If you ever have trouble seeing, adjust the light. Sometimes that can help. Okay, let me turn off solo real quick. I love how YouTube has started asking us whether or not we want to continue listening. It's freaking annoying. Alright. Let me fill this in a little bit. While I'm looking at it. Not crazy about that. Alright. I'm gonna call that good. Okay. Something else we want to look at is this connection from the deltoid pulling up some reference real quick. Yep. So we've got this situation happening here where it's like here. Got this little shape happening here. Which is meeting up with this shape happening here. Which is meeting up with this shape here. It's not quite as swoopy as that one. That's even a word, but basically that's what we're looking at. You got your insertion point somewhere here along the humerus. So I just want to make sure that it looks good enough for government work. got this shape happening here with the pec. Should be basically like this. It's a little bit much there. Move this back a little bit. Okay. All right. Next thing I want to do is deal with that forearm. So let's turn that on. Duplicate. Now this is going to give me some issues, I can tell you already, because this is going to want to close with that side. I mean, it's going to give me some issues, but not so many that I'm going to fret about it. Let's see. So we're going to Dynamesh, turn off blur, say 300. All right. Turn off solo. And primarily what I want to do is I want to be able to fill this in a little bit. The other way to do it would just simply be to mask, but I'll do it this way. Whoops. That'll probably be good. It's not that crucial. Okay. So I'm going to bring this one up here. Go to the body. Merge this one down. Now let's do another Dynamesh. And then just gently go over those seams. I don't want to obliterate all of this. And again, we're doing printing on an FDM machine. It's not going to, at the scale that this is going to be, it's not going to be a huge deal. Let me solo this. I want to have a look at the fingers. Just take a few steps back. Okay. No. I just need to bump it just enough so that so I don't have those fingers trying to connect with one another. So let me duplicate. Bring this one back up. So we're going to go merge down. There we go. Now we're sitting at 843,000. Let's try 300. No, sir. There we go. Seems pretty steep, but I guess the other way we could have done it is by doing a live boolean. That would have been a good way to go about it too. All right. Check and see where we're at on time. All right. We're doing all right. So I've got those things resolved. The arms are blended in. And I guess the last little thing that I want to do today is I want to make him some moccasins. And the way I'm going to go about that is pretty simple. I'm going to say, I'm going to go to this subtool. And he is pretty much already, I'm just basically going to duplicate this subtool. So I'm going to dupe. I'm going to solo it. And I know that I'm only going to collect his feet. That's the only thing that I want to do. So I'm going to select lasso. I'm going to invert my selection. Go to geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. And then I want to remesh these. That's a little bit steep for what we're trying to do here. So I'm going to go Dynamesh, bring this down to like 200. There we go. That's a little more reasonable. And all I'm going to do is basically cover this. And ultimately it's going to get merged into one solid piece eventually. So I'm going to come over it with my clay brush. I'm just going to keep working this in until it's somewhat of the shape that I'm looking for. Try to fill this in a bit, because it's just going to get filled in with support material for the most part if I don't do something about it. Okay. And I'm not going to get too detailed on it. Call it lazy. I just know that it's not going to matter at the scale that I'm working at. Now, if I was working on something that's going to be like high detail, there are other ways I would have gone about this. Just filling it in. Let me make some room here. A bit much. Turn off lazy mouse there. Might help me a little. There we go. Alright, so no need to go through and grab like little spheres and stuff like that. If you have existing geometry, you need to make some quick little shoes or something like that, you can use that. Now, if it's obviously got to be like a specific type of sneaker or something like that, then maybe use a different method. I guess the other thing I'll do here real quick is I know that I need to figure out this base a little bit. So whenever I print this, I want to have a little bit of room on the bottom. Just enough. Probably about maybe a quarter of an inch or so. So what I want to do is I'm going to take this polygroup here, right? And I'm going to use my transpose line. Let's come straight down. Hold Control, Shift, and drag. And it'll drag this out a bit, right? And what that's going to do is it's going to give me some material to work with. And I can go back and do a Dynamesh. Probably don't need that much material. Let's do resolution of 96. There we go. That's much better. And I'm not going to clean this up too much because I'm going to end up chopping it off anyway. But let me zap that off. Modify, delete hidden. Remesh will close the hole up for me. Okay. And I'm pretty much going to leave it like that until we go through and start parting this out. And the reason why is because I'm going to do, when I do start parting it out, I'm going to use a combination of things. We're going to do a live boolean. to get some pretty sharp connections between pieces. Let me get rid of some of this choppiness here. Might add a little bit of noise on this. Let's do that. Let's see what our noise brush will give us. All right. There's some other things I could do, I guess. Let's see. Yeah. On our next session, we might try some alphas, see how they work out. Maybe add some cragginess to this. Make it look like a rock. Well, basically, this is pretty much where we're at. I guess the one other thing I could do here is I do need to Q mesh this. Oh, come on now. Oh, that's why. All right. We're going to delete this. Stitch to midpoint. Just repairing some geo real quick. And then I'm going to have to go through and add the creases back to it. Delete. Let's do a groups by normals. And then we will do geometry, crease, set this down, crease polygroups. That looks a little bit better. To me, anyway. So let's see. So for next session, what we'll do is we'll fix this little pieces over by the ears, and we got to get the head welded in. And then once that is done, then we need to go through and start figuring out how we're going to do all the final welds on this, get it all attached as one piece, which will probably end up being like a live boolean. And then we'll start looking at pairing all this together, chopping it up, and making it print ready. And we'll have a bit of a discussion on like how to navigate that. I'll also I guess probably hop into Simplify 3D, which is the slicer that I use, just to show you how to set it up. And then once all those things are completed, it's really just a matter of getting it printed. And then once everything is printed, then I guess I can do a little bit of show and tell on how to apply the surface coatings to make it all look nice. But aside from that, it's just, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3 major operations. We've got to do something with this collar, and then that'll pretty much be it. So we're making good speed, and that's about all there is for this session. So thanks for hanging out. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them, and I will try to get to them. Appreciate your time. Hope you guys are having a great Sunday. Peace out.